Remember what it was like to be a kid? To explore and play. To roam free all day. In Jamestown, North Carolina, we get out of the grind and escape into the moment. People feel good here. Let loose here. Eat well here. Feel swell here. We go for a ride or an afternoon stroll. We cheer each other on. And go for the goal. Here, a treasured history meets the energy of a town on the rise. In a place with true heart and soul, and where we have our own special beat. Jamestown, North Carolina, where history and possibility meet.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to call this planning board meeting together tonight. We welcome all of you here. We're glad you're here. We hope to hear from some of you, and we hope to hear from most of you and accomplish the business of the town of Jamestown here tonight. So we welcome you. I'd like to call on Anna to take our roll call.
Sarah Glanville.
Okay.
Absent. Ed Stafford.
Present?
Dennis Scholl.
Present.
Jane Walker Payne.
Here.
Russ Walker.
Here.
Carrie Miller.
Here.
Robert Kuhn.
Here.
Donald Dale.
Here.
Peggy Levi.
Here.
Sherry Richmond is absent. William McLean.
Present.
And our council representative, Rebecca Mann Rayborn.
Here.
We have a quorum as present.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, I trust that all the members have had a chance to review the minutes from January 9th, 2023. And I'd like to call for a motion to approve the minutes from someone on the board.
So moved. Approve the minutes, please.
All right.
Second.
Okay, second. All those approve, say aye.
Aye.
Any negatives? Okay. The minutes are approved. Okay, we'll begin our public hearing now on the LDO amendments, and we're going to call Anna forward to speak about the amendments to us.
Good evening, members of the planning board. I haven't seen many of you since I had a baby back in November.
You had a baby?
Yeah, I'm looking good now. So, it's great to see you all. Tonight's public hearing is for several updates to the Land Development Ordinance, or the LDO. At April's Town Council meeting, Councilmember Rayborn directed staff to review the signage ordinance in respect to digital signs. Tonight, we'll go over those updates and changes as well as several others. Anytime we update the ordinance, planning staff tries to make sure that any other known needed updates or corrections are made at the same time. So tonight, we'll touch on a number of updates, not just digital signage. So in front of you, you have a fresh agenda packet. It's the exact same as the agenda packet that was emailed to you last week, but this one has page numbers, which I found is very helpful to have you on the same page. So as we flip through, it'll kind of make sure we're in the same spot. So I'd like to start with section 11.5, which is landscape plan procedures. Very exciting. This is page 7 in your packet. The need for this change is that this was actually one missed from when we did the General Statute 160D updates. General Statute 160D says that performance guarantee bonds may not exceed 125% of the reasonably estimated cost. Our ordinance had 150, which is no longer allowed, so that update is to 125%. Article 17, moving forward, is on sign regulations. So in addition to digital signage, staff have made a few changes to reorganize or reword language just to be more clear. And before I dive into those changes, I want to make note of a concern that was raised about yard signs not being allowed or being disallowed in residential yards. So section 17.5, prohibited signs and sign characteristics. The first bullet is snipe/yard signs. We recently added the word yard signs in a past ordinance update because the general public doesn't know what a snipe sign is. But if I say, you know, those yard signs on the corner, people know. So snipe/yard signs. But just like the next section is 17.6, exempt signs. Just like election signs are a type of yard sign and are exempt during election periods, there is also a section that allows for temporary signs in residential districts. They're allowed under the same exempt sign section. So just to put any worries to rest that you have to take down your signs in your personal yard saying your kid graduated or I love Jesus or whatever you've got, they are certainly allowed because they are under that exempt sign section. So I just wanted to make sure that was covered and clear since some planning board members had raised concerns. Moving on to what has changed in the ordinance, on your packet page 10, the language on election signs has been simplified. Every time I read this, I read it a different way and interpreted it a different way, and I thought if I can't do this, and I look at ordinances all day, most people can't either. So what we've done is we've taken out there were several different limits on how many you're allowed to put in your yard or on the right-of-way. We've taken out that limit. Honestly, it's impossible to enforce because if our code enforcement goes and starts pulling up one person's signs but not another, it's not a good look. So the number is whatever you put up in the right-of-way is what's going to stay up. But the sign area stays the same, 6 square feet, so there's no giant signs going up. And the limit is 30 days prior to one-stop early voting and no later than 7 days. So that stayed the same. This bullet has also been moved to where it makes more sense if you were looking for it, over to the temporary 17.61 temporary real estate construction campaign philosophical yard signs. Moving on over to
Give the page, would you?
page 13. Development projects under active building permits. We had the development projects in residential districts could be no more than 6 square feet, which means the townhomes going in down the road could only have a 6 square foot sign, which is the same as your election sign, which did not seem reasonable. So we've changed it so development projects under active building permits are permitted 1 sign per street frontage up to 36 square feet. That's the same as any commercial project or anything like that. They are only allowed while there is a building permit. So once that project is completed, that large sign would have to come down. Number 7 on that same page, you'll see where that election section has been moved, signs have been moved.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes?
How long do they have before they have to take it down? It says when the work's no longer being done, but how long after that?
Completion of permitted work or permit expires. So
So if
once
the-
it's completed, the sign's coming down.
So if the work's done early and the permit's still good, they can leave the sign?
Is once the permit expires,
Okay, just so I know.
And are the permits good for 1 year?
the what?
Are the building permits good for 1 year normally?
I'm not sure. I think it probably depends on the type of permit.
Okay.
Now we're going to get to the fun stuff. On page 16 is digital signs.
One question about, going back to that, page 13, number 6. In the case of the large area that's going to be developed, a sign will probably be there for as long as any building permit for all of that acreage is there?
Well, there is still a limit on the number of signs you can have up, so it would probably move along with the phases, because it is still subject to road frontage and size. So if first phase was done off of Mackey, the sign would probably be there. When that phase was completed, I would expect those, because they'll be done in sections, those permits, so it would move along with the different phases.
Okay, so it should be on the phase property that's being,
It would still be what's permitted, though. So, but if you can't have 2 monument signs on one street frontage, it's still not allowed, so.
okay.
Page 16, digital signs. So this is what Councilmember Rayborn has directed staff to look at. And the immediate concern for staff when we looked at this was the potential takeaway from Jamestown's small-town charm. With some digital signs on Main Street and residential areas. That small-town charm was the #1 vision for when we did the comprehensive plan. So I think the council members and staff and planning board would probably like to keep it. So I'd like to thank Ty, the planning technician. He did a lot of legwork on this. He pulled a lot of different ordinances from other local municipalities and governments and compared them to ours. The largest change here is that formerly digital signs were permitted anywhere in Jamestown, any zoning district. You could put one on your house if you had a home occupation. Nothing, we couldn't have stopped it. So this allows for digital signage shall be permitted in civic, commercial, and bypass zoning districts. So civic would be something that's zoned like a church, a school, a community center. Commercial, the area that's zoned commercial in Jamestown is down there by True Value, that shopping center. But moving closer towards downtown, that turns into Main Street transitional, where it would not be permitted. And bypass, that's over at Grandover and on the bypass. So additionally, what I would like to point out is that this stops those digital signs from being near the kind of historic Main Street, as well as near residential, because adjacent to Main Street is residential Main Street transitional and commercial Main Street transitional. So it kind of acts as a nice buffer from that. So that's how staff has chosen those options to present. Additionally, the display time, it was allowed 5 seconds. Image or phrase could be displayed. It's now up to 10 seconds. We found that's what a lot of other jurisdictions did, and that made sense for us. The already existing requirements of being off between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., they are still there, and our limitations on brightness, flashing, no videos, messaging, they remain. Staff found that those limitations were in line with and often more stringent than other municipalities. So we're looking really good there. Also added was each message can be no longer than 4 lines of information in length. So if you're sitting at the stoplight, you're not trying to read a novel on that digital sign. Up to 4 lines max. Also added in here was digital and non-digital menu boards have been added. We didn't really have anything on menu boards. You could have put a whole line on menu boards if we couldn't do much. So this is 32 square feet per lane, shall be limited to the maximum height of 8 feet. 8 feet is the max height pretty much of all of our signs. I do have in here, and I noticed when I was making sure I knew what I was going to say to y'all, it does say digital menu boards for businesses may be allowed upon meeting size, time, and brightness standards. I would like, if this adopted, to take off time, because obviously restaurants with drive-thrus are often open later than 10 p.m. and will still need their menu boards up. So if adopted, I would like to take out the word time, or if recommended. Finally, this has been added to there's a nice chart that makes it easy for people making signs that say all the requirements. Digital menu boards have been added there with, not digital menu boards, digital signs have been added with all the same requirements, sizes, and there's in the other requirements, it says, shall we comply with design requirements of section 17.7-2A, which is all those very stringent things I just went over with brightness, time, message flashing, no flashing lights, nothing like that. Also in the signage section, temporary signs. We're on page 22. Formerly, on allowable zoning districts, this said, all commercial and mixed-use district. So what staff has done is listed specific zoning districts, which now allows banners to be allowed in civic, industrial, parks, agriculture. If there was a strawberry picking, they could have a banner. To allow those zones that we've traditionally allowed banners to be officially on here. The other things that have been taken out, the word temporary feather flags. Most feather flags, if they're, you could call them, say it's not temporary, so we just, feather flags in general. Banners are permitted, so I don't know why banners was on there, so we took off the word banners. And then properties on which civic institution, educational institution, or other civic organizations are situated, that has just been stricken because it's now listed in the allowable zoning districts. So we just covered there instead. So that is our signage. We have 2 more to go over, and if you have questions about signage, we can of course come back to it. Section 19.30-1, pet waste. It's on page 26, but I actually want you at your seats, there's a separate paper that says pet waste. A planning board member called or emailed and said, the way this is written now, I can't let my dog out at night to use the bathroom without being on a leash at my own house. And I said, yeah, you know what, I have a dog and I do that too, that makes sense. So we've borrowed some language from how it used to be. So the original is down at the bottom. It shall be unlawful for the owner of any dog to allow the animal off premise of the owner and not be on a leash in Jamestown. So the issue we have with this is that Jamestown is getting a dog park. And according to this, you have to have your dog on a leash in a dog park. So we're updating this so it says if it's off the premise of their owner, it needs to be contained inside an enclosure, a leash, or otherwise confined. Dogs may be off leash within the boundaries of a legal dog park. This opens it up if it's becoming more popular, like bars where you can bring your dog and they have dog runs in them. So this allows us, we don't have to rewrite this if something like that were to come. Just looking forward. And finally, we have some changes to the permitted use table that's on page 27, 28 in your packet, this blue and gray chart. 2 changes to this. The first is for fences. Parks and Recreation did not allow fences on this permitted use table, which a fence should certainly be at a park. So they are now permitted on this recommended permitted use table. And there were 2 uses for duplexes. There are 2 listings. One was dwelling, duplex, and the other was 2-family dwelling, twin home, or duplex. So those have been combined into one use of dwelling, duplex, duplex, or twin home. And where they're permitted has been combined so that they're all the same. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss any changes that y'all might have before a public hearing. This is a public hearing, of course, so.
Any
Carrie?
questions? Yes, Carrie.
Yeah, on the digital sign, what is the process for those not in compliance? Is that an issue, or are they
So just like
grandfathered?
code enforcement, so if they're not in compliance now, so for example, there's a new one over by Scientific, there's a digital sign. It has to be in compliance still with all the digital signage things we already have. It has to be off at 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. It has to have the maximum brightness. But all of our signs are grandfathered in until they are no longer useful, in which case you can't replace a digital sign with a digital sign.
Okay,
So if it's non-compliant, it would be grandfathered in.
okay.
But any future signs, if somebody next door wanted to put one up, and they say, my neighbor has one, I'd say, well, I'm sorry, that's not permitted in this zone because you're residential, commercial Main Street.
Are there quite a number of them in town?
Are there what?
Are there quite a number of them?
I think there's only 2. There's a one on Scientific, does GTCC have one?
Yes, and Jamestown Presbyterian has one.
Jamestown Presbyterian, GTCC, and the corner of Scientific and Main. So there's a couple of
Okay.
churches, church civic, so civic uses are where you typically see those signs, which is
Oh,
one of the
actually
reasons
curious.
we got it.
Thank you.
And what is the penalty for non-compliance?
So if they're not compliant, just like any other zoning issue that's non-compliant, code enforcement will go, they'll make sure they're in compliance. If they continue to be out of compliance, we will apply fines every day they're not in compliance. Or work with them if there's a change that's needed, like, well, my sign doesn't go to that brightness, we will work with them and make sure they're working on getting in compliance.
On the examples on 18 and 19, and this is a little bit picky, but since menu signs have a little bit different from regular digital, would an example of a menu sign be appropriate to add to that list?
We could do that,
Just a suggestion.
yeah, it's up to you, we could certainly do it.
I just put it out there because it is a little bit, well, the time requirement we know is if we adopt your change would be a little bit different.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, as I was writing this up, I thought, hey, you know, you can't order your Starbucks at 11 if this signs are off. So,
Isn't it a little strange that the heading for pet waste, and then what you've got there doesn't have anything to do with pet waste?
so this section is in 19, which I believe is stormwater, which is where just they end up talking about dogs and pet waste. So it originated here because pets need to be on a leash and you have to pick up your pet waste. So that's how it ended up.
So
in
we
that
still
section.
have a requirement to pick up after your
You
pet.
still have to pick up your pet waste. It's a big stormwater no-no to leave that out. Section, I think this is A, I think B talks about picking up your pet waste. Are there any
Any
other questions?
questions of Anna? Guys?
This is a public hearing, so, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we're going to open the public hearing to anyone that would like to speak about the proposed amendments. And we ask them to state their name and address and to adhere to the 3-minute time limit. Anybody like to come up and speak? Please, Carol, come on up. The floor is yours. Tell us your name and where you're from, although I know.
Okay. I'm Carol Hay, and I live at 607 West Main Street here in Jamestown.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. And what I'd like to speak on is the signage, especially the sign up past our house that turns our house green at times. The flashing, it was changed from one color to another. And I've spoken to some of you on that before, about that before. And it is very, very annoying, especially if you have company.
Yeah.
Trying to sit out on the porch and it's getting dark and all you see is the house turns green. Looks like little green people. And our neighbor, which we talked to him over the weekend, his name is Chris Hay, and he lives right next door to us. And he was saying it's the most annoying thing, and he's like us. Businesses, that's great, but you don't want to come into an old historic town. And all of a sudden, you start up the hillside and there's these flashing lights. And you really can't tell exactly what it's advertising. We've had some people ask, some friends that was out on the porch said, "Oh my God, what are they advertising up there?" They said, "It looks like it could be for a ladies' night out or something like that." and it's the doctor's office.
Okay.
I just don't think Jamestown should have flashing signs, especially when it flashes in the people's windows that you want to come, to your business. So I'm hoping, I thought if they can do it, looks like there's going to be a lot of other people that are going to want to do that. Put up flashing signs as advertisement. So that's what, I know Richard's family has always kept North State, when it was North State, from having a sign over there. And, it's a big sign that's bright and lights up everything. And thank God we were told that the new ones would not put up a sign there. So that, to me, I just don't want to see Jamestown turn into a little, do away with the reason people want to come here
Okay.
and go to our restaurants and do things like that. So I hope you'll take this in consideration. Someone was asking me, said, well, and it's supposed to turn off after 10 o'clock at night. Well, that's great, but we're in bed at that time. Or, soon after, so we're not going to see it.
Okay.
So I think it should, when they close down their business, at least for the day, that sign should go off. And I want them to have a good business there. I just don't want it to be aggravating other people when it's not necessary. If I just had a lit sign that was clear white, and didn't change colors, that would be great.
Well, thank you, Carol. That's a reasonable request, and I appreciate you coming to us and sharing it with us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Thank you very much. Matt, let me just ask you, isn't that's a business area shining into a historic residential neighborhood? Are there any protections against that?
I'm going to defer your questions to Anna. She's the planning director.
Okay, Anna?
Yeah,
Tell me.
so there are limits on maximum brightness factors, and there are limits. You cannot have fading, flashing, scrolling, spinning, or other animated effects. So we should not see flashing blue, green, red, green.
Right.
If that's the case, I would encourage anyone to send me a video or let me know what time, and we can get somebody out there to record it at that time. To make sure that's not happening, it would be code enforcement.
What would be the time of night that the limitations would apply?
So the digital signs currently, and as proposed, are 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. should be off. Again, so the reason this came up was because of signs in those areas which are adjacent to residential. So
Yeah.
with this update, they would no longer be allowed in a transitional, residential transitional, commercial transitional area. It would only be commercial, civic, and bypass. But as far as currently happening, the best thing would do, we can talk to the business owner and adhere to their goodwill and ask for a change of their time. But it should only be a certain brightness already. It should not be blinding because there's a 33% maximum white bright factor. And there's no flashing, scrolling, spinning allowed.
So if it's doing those things it's not supposed to do, would citizen have to take their phone and take a video of it with the timestamp on it?
That would be ideal, or they
Take
can
a
just,
Picture?
ideally, yeah, they would report it to us for code enforcement, a picture with a timestamp, a video, or you can just say, I recorded this at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
And just let us know. We're not trying to make things difficult. I'm not here at 10 p.m., so.
But we could get Matthew over here at 10:05 just to go. Thanks.
So if there is existing violations, where, of course, code enforcement would be more than willing to take care of those.
You said that sign is grandfathered, though, is that right? Because
That sign would be grandfathered in.
they're good.
Doesn't mean we can't ask.
Goodwill is what that was.
It cannot come, we cannot make them take it down.
But you can limit the brightness and the flashing lights and stuff.
Yes, the brightness and flashing lights, those are already,
Already in the ordinance.
They're
already in the
already in the
ordinance. So we can make sure those are being,
Make sure they're being obeyed.
yeah, so we can check on that. And I wrote down her name and information to double check that.
Okay.
I came up because I can't see Dennis.
Well, I couldn't see you either. That's why
I saw your hand.
That's why I was waving at you over there. Who does the codes enforcement here?
So currently, we contract with Alliance Code Enforcement. Starting on July 1, our planning technician, Ty Cheek, will be taking over code enforcement. We're bringing it back in-house. So if you have any code enforcement issues, you can call Town Hall directly, starting July 1, and we will take care of them.
You've been subbing it out, but we're bringing it in-house.
Yes.
Okay, that's good, that's better.
Exactly how do they do it? They don't drive around looking for things, do they? Like, for instance, signs,
We often drive around and look for signs.
I mean, I'm thinking about a police officer, he'll chalk a tire if you're in a 2-hour zone or something like
Yeah,
that.
so we often go around and look for snipe signs, yards.
Wait. Define that word.
So a snipe sign, which is why the ordinance was updated to say snipe/yard. You know those signs on the corner that say, "We'll clean your gutters, we buy ugly houses, yard
Oh, yeah.
sale next week"?
Yes.
Those are snipe signs, also known as yard signs. So if we see those in the right-of-way, driving around, code enforcement will always pull them up. But as far as other things, like there's a new sign over on the Food Line Shopping Center that when we saw it, we said, we didn't permit this, it's giant. We've reached out to them, they will be taking it down. So we do look for code violations even as we're driving around. But
Now, if the, excuse, are you through?
Yeah, I did one other question.
Go ahead.
The hours, 7 a.m., they're allowed to be on from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m.
that is how the
That's,
ordinance.
and I understand grandfathering existing signs. Now, how about new ones? Can we have different hours, like, for instance, opening hours of a business?
Yeah.
Which would obviously rectify her problem if a new business came in.
Yeah, if planning board would like to make that recommendation, we could certainly make that change.
Because she mentioned the person with the sign is a doctor. They're not open at 10 o'clock.
I would caution the planning board not to say open hours because all businesses are open all different hours. It would be wise to.
But still within the context of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
It would be wise to select a range that is enforceable and equitable to all businesses.
That way, if there's a business that's open 24 hours, if you say business hours, then their sign's 24 hours.
Now, the overlying, in my opinion, the overlying would still be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and opening hours inside that. I mean, like, for instance, if you're only open from 8 to 5, why would you want to have a flashing sign or a moving sign till 10?
The enforcement of that is almost impossible. So I would.
Well, that's why I asked how you do the enforcement, because a lot of this looks impossible to me.
I wonder, have you had any complaints about the 7-Eleven sign up next to the residential area?
That's 7-Eleven is in Greensboro, in High Point, so we
Oh, it
wouldn't have
is?
any
Okay.
jurisdiction, yeah.
Okay.
Flowers is, on that side of the road, Flowers is the last parcel. of
Okay,
Jamestown.
all right, thank you. Okay, so other than being able to enforce the laws that are on the books about the doctor's office, unless it changes hands and a different business comes in there, we can't do anything about the sign.
If it changes hands,
Let's say a different business comes there, would the different business have to abide by the new?
the sign is existing, so it's the sign, not the business. So it's the same as if a commercial business is grandfathered into its zoning and it continues being the same business or the same commercial use, it's still allowed, it's grandfathered. So, but if that sign breaks, and it needs to be replaced over several years, you cannot replace it with another digital sign because it would not be permitted in that area. But what you can do that's enforceable, Dennis, is instead of 10 p.m., you could change this to 8 p.m. or whatever time may be more reasonable in planning board eyes.
Well, okay.
Staff recommends 10 PM based on what we've read on other ordinances, but that doesn't mean that's what we have to do. And that's, planning board, we ask for your opinions and recommendations on that.
So we could suggest 9 PM instead of 10 PM.
Yes. And whatever you recommend will go to town council, and then, of course, they'll vote.
And of course, the town council makes the final decision. We just make recommendations.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, are there any other, thank you, Anna. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council, this public hearing? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close a public hearing after the last speaker. And although we've already done this, we've opened the floor to planning board discussions. Is there, are most of you at peace with the 7 to 10? Or would some of you think for a small town that has residential areas near commercial, changing that back to 7 to 9 PM in the evenings rather than 10 PM?
The one concern I would have with adjusting the time shorter in the evening is, you do have businesses such as restaurants and grocery stores and convenience stores and that are open that late. So if you narrow the time, that would disadvantage them. So I'd want to be cautious about that.
And is it 10 o'clock a standard from what your research? Is that pretty much consistent?
Yes,
It's
Ty
surrounding-
did that research, and he says yes. And I would remind you, as Robert pointed out, that those businesses and things for future digital signs would not be permitted near residential. It would only be zoned commercial, bypass, or civic. So if a church was next to it, residential is about the only time there would be. But those kind of transitional areas that are near residential, they are not included in this, just as you consider those options.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Peggy.
Could it be written such that if it is illuminating on a residence, that the time would be earlier in the evening?
The way to do that would be if it was adjacent to a single-family residential.
So across the street wouldn't necessarily be adjacent to,
That would be adjacent.
that would be adjacent to. Would anybody like to make a motion to that, and then we can discuss it and vote on it? See if it would,
I would like to move that any existing signs or future signs that illuminate onto a resident or adjacent to a resident would be the better terminology.
Yeah, so what I would recommend, I'm going to stand up again so
Okay.
Dennis and Russ can see me. What I would
You are
recommend
short.
for that is for the language, and correct me if this isn't allowed, Diana, but I believe it would be, that digital signs must be off between 10 PM and 7 AM daily. Digital signs located adjacent to a single-family residential must be off between X time and X time, whatever the board would decide. So then you could do a separate option that would,
like you could do 8 to 9 instead of 7 to 10.
yes, and so that way it could be enforceable because it's adjacent to a single-family residence, which is very easy to recognize.
It has to be definable so you know how to enforce it.
Yeah, so, and that allows for, as Robert pointed out, some restaurants and businesses that, especially where now currently bypass is not next to single-family residences, it
Right.
would still be permitted. So that's how I'd recommend it. If that's how the board wanted to do it, I think, and Katie can correct me, you can make a motion saying, I make a motion to recommend this to council with the discussed changes to time and adjacent properties as discussed.
I would like to so move that with the time being 8 PM
Oh, you mean from 7 to 8 p.m.?
From 7, yes, and the closing at 8 p.m. in the evening.
Yeah, and I will point out that it's does not mean that the sign that already exists has to follow that. It is still grandfathered in. But for any future signs, it would be covered. And we will speak to that, as I mentioned, we'll speak to that business owner and see if we can talk to them about that signage anyway.
Second.
Yes,
I'll second the
you
motion.
second, okay. All right, so we have a motion that for,
So there's a motion to recommend that town council approve the LDO amendments with the requested changes to those specified time periods. And then we have a
Yes.
second.
Could I don't mean to break anything, but could I ask a question? just
Sure.
That could clarify for
Please.
the council? I know that there's been mainly discussion of the times and everything like that, but Ms. Hayes did mention, and I just sort of wonder for feedback to the council, if there's any thought about, does Jamestown need digital signs? I mean, there would be the option of just saying there would be no digital signs in town. So is that something anyone's interested in, or we really do feel like digital signs enhance the town? We just want them only in particular places, only in certain hours?
so rather than limiting them, do away with them completely.
And that's totally up to you, but I do, that was something that popped into my mind, and especially when Ms. Hayes mentioned that, is that something, and there may be a lot of support for digital signs in town among the board. That's just something, I would want some clarification on. Thanks.
Well, as it stands right now, there's a motion and a second on the floor, so there needs to be a vote that's taken. You guys can make a recommendation, and then council can decide whether or not they want to approve
Yes.
how you recommend it, but I need to do a roll call vote on
Well,
the motion.
let's do a,
Is there further discussion by the board after the second motion?
I would like to table my motion for this discussion.
You want to withdraw your motion?
I will withdraw the
Okay,
motion.
all right, then you can continue to
You
discuss.
need to withdraw your second.
Withdraw.
Okay, great.
Then we can,
Now you can discuss.
now we can discuss some more.
Yeah, you can continue.
Okay. Well, what are your thoughts?
My thinking about it, and I think about, I think we've got a valid concern that we've discussed, but I think of where we're progressing as far as, and the digital signs I'm thinking of are more the church signs that are in here, like the one up on Guilford College. Limiting them to where they're basically in a business, they're non-resident, they're non-adjacent to residential. Limiting them to 4 lines, limiting to the time, limiting to what they can do. My knee-jerk says that strikes a balance between what we want to keep and what we have versus letting, the wild, wild west as far as signs. I mean, there's signs along Wendover that are, the flag in 1 second and, whatever on the next second. And I don't think we want that in this area.
Right.
But I think the way it's been defined, I think that strikes a balance.
Okay.
Because I think I do believe the people that'll be disturbed the most are those in residential areas. And the way we're adjusting the sign ordinance now addresses that concern, because they're outside of the transitional areas.
Right, right.
But you would still be in favor of the reduced time as far as a restriction?
I'm not opposed to it as far as being adjacent to residential, but my understanding is outside of what we're doing now, the new ordinance addresses that because it's non-residential anyway, or non-residential adjacent. And the sign we have a complaint about is going to be grandfathered in. So I'm not sure, I think the intent's already covered by keeping it away from residential
In the new ordinance.
in the proposed ordinance, yeah. So, like I said, I'm not opposed to it because I don't think it really adds anything, but I'm not necessarily for it because I don't think it adds anything.
Okay.
And I have another question for you.
Yeah.
Going back to enforcement, you said if a sign that currently exists in an area that it won't exist in the future, if that sign breaks, you can't replace it with, can you repair it?
I pulled that up while on my
Because
ordinance.
I was just thinking to myself, how do you enforce that?
So non-conforming signs, there's a whole section, shall be grandfathered until such sign is removed, physically altered beyond maintenance, relocated, damaged, or destroyed, after which it shall be brought into compliance with all requirements of this article.
Okay,
So.
that's the whole thing.
That's, I looked it up.
You answered my
while,
question.
While we were sitting there.
And that'll include an act of God.
If it's damaged or destroyed, beyond repair.
Good, okay. Okay, so
So as Katie mentioned, I believe you have a motion and a second, so that is.
No, she
she
tabled.
withdrew.
Oh,
I withdrew it.
that's probably why I was looking this up.
To have the discussion. Trying to, when you're driving down the street, if there is a sign that is changing, and I know even if the brightness is 1 foot of candlelight, that is still a distraction to a lot of people who have eye issues. And your eyes do dilate and change, I being one of them.
Yeah.
I find them very irritating. The fact that we could eliminate those digitals on any roadway, I think would be a benefit to safety, actually, for our community. Maybe we should think further about that. I also know that the churches, et cetera, want to change it because they change the time of their services and have that ability. But I'm not sure what the 1 candle of light, I think that's a small amount of light, to be honest. But I don't know what the dimness is.
Yeah. Well, I know that it's always been difficult for businesses to really make a living in Jamestown in the past. And now we have many restaurants that are established, and the business community is much better than it's been in the past here. And I don't want to do anything to throw a damper on that, but I would like to protect our residential subdivisions. And I don't know if your motion to help accommodate this particular specific situation, since it's grandfathered in, and we won't be able to use it against them to change that. And it's already in the code if it breaks down, they can't put it back. Then I think our best, we can certainly pursue making sure the candlelight, the flashing light, and all that stuff stops at a certain time every day. And if it makes sure it's compliant with all the rules and regs we have. But if we change something just to address that one sign, and they're grandfathered in,
I agree.
Doesn't matter.
you know,
Yeah.
I'd like to do it because I feel better about it,
Yeah.
you know, but it would be like a toothless tiger, you know. Anyhow, does anybody have a motion you'd like to make before we go to approve this?
Do we need to make a motion for the kind of the changes that were on the fly? So like on the pet waste and then the time limit on menu? Do we need to do a separate?
So you can make a motion to recommend approval of the LDO amendments with the requested changes. The pet waste was something that was presented. If you guys want to change the time limitations, you would need to specify that part of it, because that wasn't
I
part.
was speaking specifically about time on the menu signs,
Oh, on the menu side.
which was
I think-
presented also.
I think as long as you say with the requested changes, you're good.
Okay.
add just one more thing? There are no adjacent homes in the area that we are going to allow these signs going forward in the future, correct?
Anna?
I'd have to look at a zoning map. I can do that for you, but if you were to add the adjacent time, that would be covered. There is a possibility that the commercial area up near Pennyburn may back up to adjacent properties, single families, where I'm thinking. So I do believe there's at least one occurrence, but there may be more without me doing a
So my initial motion would protect that
Yes,
possibility.
so again, if you made a motion with the changes as presented and an additional change to the time of adjacent adjacent residential properties.
Okay.
So it would add protection for existing near residential adjacent properties.
Yes, so it wouldn't change the existing sign, but in the future, if a commercial property was adjacent to a single-family property, it would change it so the time would be whatever limit you put on it.
Then I would like to restate my motion.
Okay.
Put that back on the table.
All right,
To limit the time for any digital sign to be turned off at 8 PM rather than 10 PM if it illuminates onto an adjacent
Residential property.
residential property.
okay. All right, do we have a second?
I'll second that, yeah.
Okay, Donald? All right, do we,
It's a roll call.
okay,
Robert Kuhn,
Aye.
Bill McLean,
Aye.
Jane Walker Payne,
Aye.
Carrie Miller,
Yes?
Ed Stafford,
yes,
Russ Walker,
Aye.
Dennis Shaw,
No.
Peggy Levi,
Yes?
Donald Dale.
Yes.
The motion passes.
so, now do we approve the whole with this change? Or do we just approve the whole with
We
this?
just did that. So now we move on to the consistency statement.
All right.
If somebody has that.
Now, Carrie, would you read the consistency statement for us?
Certainly. I make a motion that the proposed zoning amendment be approved based on the following. Number one, the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan of the town of Jamestown. The planning board further finds that the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan because periodic updates to the zoning text are necessary based upon changing conditions, regulations, and laws. Updates establish town compliance with regulating bodies and ensure that guiding documents are accurately operational for each of the current goals of the comprehensive land development plan. And number two, the proposed zoning amendment is reasonable. The planning board considers the proposed zoning amendment to be reasonable because, A, the report of the town staff finding the proposed ordinance amendment to be reasonable is adopted by reference, and B, the planning board further finds that the proposed zoning amendment is reasonable because the request to update the ordinances stem directly from updates to the state and federal laws which the town is required to comply with, and the text edits add clarifying and zoning language to make the documents easier to interpret and apply. And number three, the proposed zoning amendment is in the public interest. The planning board considers the proposed zoning amendments to be in the public interest because, A, the report of the town staff finding the proposed zoning amendment to be in the public interest is adopted by reference, and B, the planning board further finds the proposed zoning amendment is in the public interest because it will assist the town in maintaining the small town feel by considering signage types in the most appropriate settings.
Good, thank you. That's a mouthful. Thank you, Carrie. Call for a second on the motion.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Okay, on the public comment period, Katie, has anybody signed up to speak?
Nobody signed up.
Okay. All right. Accordingly, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.